Questions you didn't know you should be asking is for anyone who thinks that the Bible is confusing, boring, that it contradicts itself, or that it could only be understood by clergy. It's also for anyone who's just curious to hear about the Bible without the pressure of burning in hell for eternity. One question that may not appear to turn the entire church community on its head is Genesis chapter 2 a retelling of Genesis chapter 1? And very importantly, why does it matter? Understanding. Understanding the differences between Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2 gives you clarity, and clarity matters. Clarity allows you to appreciate and to understand why there are differences between the details of Genesis chapter 1, which is the epoch referred to in the Bible as the heavens and the earth, and the epoch referred to as the earth and the heavens, and the purposes of each. Clarity allows you to see that two distinct men, two sons of God, were created in the opening chapters of the Bible. And while the majority of the world believes that two different words were used to express one idea, clarity allows you to understand the differences between the image and the likeness of God. Clarity also allows you to understand the biblical meaning of God's command to be fruitful and multiply. And instead of settling for anyone telling you that the origin of the offices of king and priest isn't mentioned in the Bible, clarity allows you to show the exact verses where these offices were ordained. Clarity also allows you to understand who the sons of God are throughout the Bible, and in particular in Genesis chapter 6. Clarity also leads you to understand the intended lesson for the person whom the Bible is all about, you. So, let's get into it. The first question that you didn't know that you should be asking that I'm going to answer is, why are there differences between the details of Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 2, if Genesis chapter 2 is a retelling of Genesis chapter 1? The simple and obvious answer is that Genesis chapter 2 is not a retelling of Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 2 starts with a new day that begins after the 7-day creation narrative is completed. It's not obvious to Bible readers, but the new day begins for Genesis chapter 2 in the middle of Genesis chapter 2 verse 4. So right after that first part of the verse, get to the middle, that's where Genesis chapter 2 actually begins. The first chapter of the Bible is completed with the declaration, these are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created. It's the first half of Genesis chapter 2, what's recorded as Genesis chapter 2 verse 4. The second chapter of the Bible begins with the declaration in Genesis chapter 2 verse 4, second half. In the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. There's a switch between the heavens and the earth to read the earth and the heavens. So what's different about this new day? A change has occurred, the obvious, or not so obvious. The heavens and the earth is now switched to read the earth and the heavens. So that's a whole new era starting. Another change, the creator is identified for the first time in the Bible as, in the text it reads, the Lord God. You could say Yahweh or Yahweh Elohim, but in the text it reads the Lord God. That's the first time that that identity is used in the Bible. Another difference to point out is man, who was created last in the creation of the heavens and the earth, is formed first in the epoch that's called the earth and the heavens. Another important thing to recognize, the fact that the plants were not yet on the earth is mentioned in Genesis chapter 2, as if to put an exclamation on the point that this day is different from the days of the heaven and the earth, because the plants were the first living things to appear on the earth, and man was last. He appeared on day 6. So a few significant differences to keep in your mind. Second question, who are the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6? It's not a major question, but one that has caused some confusion. One camp believes that these men are sinful angelic beings, and the other group believes that these men are children of Adam, and that the daughters of men mentioned in the passage are the descendants of Cain, the man who committed the first murder among men and killed his brother Abel. The real quick answer to why the sons of God are not Adam's descendants is Adam's descendants are sons of man, not sons of God. This point is somewhat reiterated in the New Testament Gospel of Luke, chapter 3, verses 23 through 38, where you get a genealogy of the Messiah's genealogy. It goes from the Messiah back to Adam, who Adam alone is referred to as the Son of God. Everyone else on that particular list has a human mother and father. The only other beings in the Old Testament who are referred to as sons of God are mentioned in Job chapter 1, verse 6, Job chapter 2, verse 1, and Job chapter 38, verse 7. You can also see or look at Psalm 82, verse 6. In the first and second chapters of the book of Job, the sons of God come before God, and Satan is among them, which should be an indication that these are not flesh and blood human beings. In Job chapter 38, verse 7, the sons of God are present when God established the foundations of the earth, again indicating that these men are not your conventional men. But they are men. This fact that they're men takes us right back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, where a man or a distinct group of men were created to uphold the foundations of the earth. They were given authority to maintain order over the creation. These kings of the earth are the men who are commonly known as angels. One example outside of the book of Genesis to see an angelic being contesting with some of these angelic world rulers is in the book of Daniel, chapter 10, verses 5 through 21. you read that, you'll see that this man was contesting with the prince of Greece, and then after him, the prince of Persia would come. Obviously, these princes, this is an angelic being. If he's contesting with princes and they're giving him trouble, and he had to be aided by Michael, and he refers to Michael as your prince, he has to be aided by Michael again, an angelic being. These other beings, obviously, are angelic beings. So, if the sons of God mentioned in Genesis chapter 6 are not the sons of Adam, the only rational conclusion about their identity is that they are angels. Third question: what is the difference between the image and the likeness of God? It's this question that really helped me to open my eyes when going through this whole process. In Genesis chapter 1, verse 26, God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." And in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, God created man in his image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female, he created them. People overlook the fact that the man created in Genesis 1:27 was created only in the image of God. This may not seem like a big deal, but God not doing what he said he would do should raise some eyebrows. It's clear from the text in Genesis 1:28 and Genesis 9:6 that the image of God granted man authority. So the question becomes, is the likeness of God just another way to say image of God? No, it's not. Now, part of the fault lies with the assumption that Genesis chapter 2 is just a retelling of Genesis chapter 1. The false assumption is also partly due to the lack of understanding about what attributes the likeness of God bestowed upon man, because it's not clearly spelled out. People assume that Adam, the man Adam, was given authority over the creation in Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28. But this assumption doesn't have any support in the Bible. Just looking at the text, Adam was formed in Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, placed in and given duties to uphold in the Garden of Eden in Genesis 2:15. Then Adam sinned and was removed from the Garden of Eden in Genesis chapter 3. Adam was not a king over the creation. He was in the role of a servant who was kicked out of his office for disobedience. It should become clear that Adam was not the man created in Genesis 1:27 and given authority over the creation. Confusion also exists partially because the blessing associated with the likeness of God in Genesis chapter 5, verse 2 is not very revealing. But a clue is given in Genesis 5:3 with the reversal of the terms image and likeness. When Seth, Adam's son, is mentioned, to read the likeness and image of Adam. Another clue comes with recognition that the command to be fruitful and multiply is only associated with the image of God and not the likeness. Without going through the many weeks of mental wrestling and just getting to the point, the image of God gave man authority, and the likeness of God gave man identity. And in that identity, man was afforded a relationship with God. In that relationship with the Lord God, the priesthood began, with Adam as humanity's first high priest and representative before God. This is reiterated in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 45. where the Messiah, who is humanity's great high priest, who came in the role of a servant, is also called the last Adam. A final issue before the end of this chapter involves the terms male and female. The man created in the image of God in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, was created male and female. These terms should be understood as masculine and feminine character traits and not their sexual gender. The masculine and feminine qualities of man bestow certain characteristics on the recipients, much in the same way as the image and the likeness of God bestow distinct characteristics on their recipients. The image equals authority and duty that is accompanied with the command to be fruitful and multiply. The command to be fruitful and multiply cross-reference Colossians 1 verse 10. I'll pull it up. The likeness equals identity, relationship, and a common bond, with also the admonition not to sever the relationship. The male or masculine character trait is brain-driven. It's rational, literal, single-minded, and accomplishment or purpose-driven. The female or feminine character trait is heart-driven and emotional. It bestows individuality, volition, creativity, and imagination. At this point, you may, depending on your religious background, you may be asking yourself, are you going to hell? Or am I going to hell for even listening to this, let alone considering it? I wrestled with this same question for a little while, because what I was discovering was very different than what I had been brought up in church learning. And so I basically trusted God. I said either God's gonna lead me in the right direction or God's gonna lead me in the wrong direction. And I trusted God to lead me in the right direction. And even though that led me far away from the church understanding that I had come to, or the church beliefs that I had come to accept from my childhood, the door was opened and I gained so much more and realized that what I had been taught was really not bringing me closer to God. It didn't help me understand who God was, what God wanted from me, what my role in being alive or, role in existence was. And this understanding did actually give me a relationship, some understanding with who God is, what God's about, and my relationship to God. So if you have that question, am I going to hell? Or, you have that fear, that worry, trust God. You can look in the text and see for yourself, read for yourself. If you have a Bible, read for yourself if what I'm presenting here is more in line with the Bible actually says. It's going to be hard to overcome your training that you may have accepted for years, depending on your age and when you first come across, church teaching. But again, the text itself is pretty straightforward. And if you can argue against anything that I'm presenting and say, hey, this is where you're wrong, this is where you have an error, please do. Please leave it in the comments. But if not, it's going to be difficult. But if not, you're going to have to question what you've been taught at church and make a decision. Thank you.